everybody and welcome to Simply Scuba. Today's surface interval is sponsored by the extreme sports magazine Mpora, but more about that later. So, with all things in life, scuba diving has a long list of do's and don'ts, things that you should and shouldn't do. The first things that you're taught are the basics really, so don't hold your breath, don't go down too deep, and don't come up too fast. Those are the golden standards, and they're all kind of a given, and you're going to be taught those in your open water course. So I'm not going to be talking about those today. So they are just no-nos, but everyone kind of knows those no-nos. But there are also unwritten rules to scuba diving. We've done at least one video on those, and that's going to pop up here thanks to Sean. But of course, here are some more rules. Less should you should always do this, but more try not to do this. So a lot of divers can fall into these scenarios accidentally or intentionally maybe without really thinking of the consequences, but I have definitely seen these and heard of these hanging out on dive boats. Now, most of these, to be honest, fall in the, just be a good person kind of category, really. But you might find yourself in one of these situations without even noticing it. But hopefully, after watching this, you might catch yourself and, end up doing the right thing. So let's take a break and look at some scuba diving no-nos. Or anybody, really. I mean, 95% of professional divers and boat crews are some of the most amazing people you will ever meet, so they don't deserve any rudeness from you. While the dive guides and instructors are looking after you in the water, the boat crew are doing amazing things and just looking after you out of the water as well. Now, I know the argument, but they're being paid, but that's besides the point, isn't it, really? So these specialists have dedicated their entire lives, or at least their current lives, to being in and around the water, and they are doing a heck of a lot of things behind the scenes that you can't really see, just so that you can have a great time, so they don't deserve any grief. Sure, there are always that remaining 5%, and they know who they are, who aren't amazing people, but they don't really deserve any grief neither, and no one does in this world. It's also not the smartest idea to get on the wrong side of your dive crew. Whilst they can make your dive an amazing experience, they can also dial that down a bit. Now, I only spent a few years and seasons teaching divers and guiding divers in the water, but in those years, I learned quite a few harmless pranks that you can pull on divers with different severities based on that person's behaviour. For most courteous divers, they will never see any pranks, just funny dive stories and scuba diving advice. If you're nice to the crew, I've ended up playing football with the guys, they've shared their dinner with me, and we all sort of laugh and joke, but as per the wise old Japanese proverb, the nail that sticks out gets hammered, so try not to stick out for the wrong reasons. There's actually a name and a bell curve for this. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and this is a bell curve that plots experience versus incidents. So the line starts down really low because when you're first starting out, one, you've got your instructor with you, keeping you nice and safe, and two, you're also naturally cautious when you're starting out, so incidents and actual accidents tend to be fairly low. Never zero, but low. The next few dives, these are the dangerous ones, where your confidence starts to grow faster than your skills do. This is when accidents tend to happen because you feel like you're a little bit bulletproof, but this means that you're more likely to push the envelope a little bit too far and then end up getting yourself hurt, either through inaction or action. The dangerous ones tend to be going down too deep, going into caves and wrecks. Those are the real sort of dangerous ones. That as well as equipment malfunction and of course your physical health. People tend to get lazy or complacent, so they don't check their gear as thoroughly as they were trained to do so because nothing bad has ever happened so far. The curve tends to drop back down as you gain experience and gain respect for what could go wrong, and you change accordingly to that. Humility is one of the most important characteristics of a diver because humble divers can look at a tempting situation and say no in their head. They can also tell their buddy that they don't feel comfortable on a dive or doing something on a dive, and they just avoid that entire situation. If you're going to be anything as a scuba diver, try to be humble. Mpora is an online magazine that is all about inspiring adventure. Whether adventure involves sliding around on a snowy mountain, pulling yourself up a rock climbing wall, riding your bike through a nice wooded trail, surfing barrels down at the beach, and yes, of course, exploring the underwater world on Scuba, it is a website that has got you covered. Mpora has everything from interviews from interesting people, previews on new events, reviews of equipment, just regular news on what has recently happened, everything to keep you clued up on the big outdoor issues. Mpora has got the lot, so definitely check them out after this video. Now, we're not the police. Well, some dive instructors are actual police officers, but most of us aren't. And we don't really care if you went a little bit too deep on that last dive, or if you do have a condition that you should have said yes to on your medical questionnaire. We don't really mind, but it is important that we know, because details like that can affect treatment after an accident or the dive plan in the first place to avoid an accident. It's also important that if something happens, even if it is your fault, even if it isn't your fault, try not to hide it. A very experienced tech diver actually died because he just fell over on the boat, didn't think too much of it, and then went on the dive anyway. The fall had actually done some damage to his liver, so try to always err on the side of caution just in case. Whilst you're filling out that diver log sheet before and after every dive with your maximum depth and your dive time, it may feel like a pain, but if something should happen to you on or after the dive and you're not conscious, that little piece of paper is going to be going with you to the hyperbaric chamber so the dive docs can tailor your treatment to your recent dive history. If you're writing down the actual details, then it's fine. You're actually going to get the correct treatment. And if you did go a little bit too deep and you did write, oh, actually, no, I did go a bit deep on this dive, then sure, we might tell you off, but at least you're going to get the correct treatment. The same goes for over-exaggerating your training or omitting a health concern. Again, we don't really care. We're not going to put you in scuba prison for whatever you've done or whatever's wrong with you, but we just don't want to be 40 meters underwater when your chronic whatever it is that hardly ever flares up, so you never thought it was worth mentioning, flares up. Again, be truthful and honest and everything will be fine and we're all just going to have a great time. Fiddling with your gear too much can be a bad thing. Dive manufacturers tend to know what they're doing when they're making the equipment, and whilst a little bit of customization can be a good thing so that your dive gear all jives with you and the way that you dive, too much can actually make things dangerous. So it's nice to be confident with your gear and know how it all works and all, but if you add too many extra little bits and pieces, then it's just more things to go wrong or to actually get snagged on things. And if you start digging around on the inside of your regulators or something, thinking that you're going to make things a little bit better, you can end up doing irreparable damage, and that's an expensive mistake to make. Fiddling around with the settings in your dive computer can be quite hazardous as well, depending on the dive computer. Most recreational dive computers, you can't screw them up too badly. The manufacturers change the user interface, so you can't make any serious problems inside of it, but be sure that you take the extra time before the dive, well before the dive, to get all of the settings correct. So your air mixture is always correct. The altitude hasn't been fiddled with, so your computer doesn't think you're diving up a mountain. Any conservative factors like your physical fitness, because the dive computer really doesn't know what the conditions are like or what you're actually breathing. It needs you to tell it so that it can do its job properly. So when you get your dive computer for the first time, do your best to read the manual. I know it's not fun, and I know it is just the perfect bedtime reading because it will put you straight to sleep, but do your best to read through it so you understand what your dive computer is trying to tell you, and then go through the settings so that you know that every section of the settings is set correctly to you and your diving. And if something changes to you or your dive, then tell your dive computer, but never guess. If you don't understand a setting on a dive computer, then just ask someone. I guarantee it, there will be a YouTube video on it explaining it, so try and sort of learn instead of just skipping over it. Try and learn what it actually means. One of my biggest pet peeves is divers that just all cram into places all at once. Of all of the space in the it's not infinite ocean, but the large oceans and seas that we dive in, you have to swim in just one particular spot. You choose to all cram into that one spot because you can't simply wait your turn. The availability of dive cameras hasn't helped this at all. I can get along with proper photographers with their really big expensive camera sets poking their nose at something for a fair while, waiting to get the perfect shot, because they're probably going to come back with some amazing results. But with a cheap point and click camera, just look around, just take a note of where the other scuba divers are around you and try to wait for your turn. Then you can get in there without getting in everybody else's way. If it's a small, slow-moving critter on the reef, then chances are it's going to be there for a while and you will get your chance in a minute. If it's a fast-moving thingamabob, then it's usually best to just give the first person space so that they can get a great shot of it and then ask for a copy of the photo later, instead of just cramming yourself in and bumping their shot so neither of you get a good shot. Whilst everyone else is all focusing on one spot on the reef, I usually turn around and look somewhere else whilst I'm waiting for my turn to put my nose in. If all the eyes are on one spot of the reef, then the entire group is going to miss whatever is sort of happening behind them. So don't just cram into one small spot all at the same time with your blinkers on, only focusing on that one thing. Just take a moment to look around, because you never know, something exciting might swim past that no one else has noticed, and you get to be first to take a photo of that. Whilst you are sort of waiting, take note of where people are and which way they're going, so that you can sort of be aware you're not going to get in anyone else's way. And if someone kicks you in the head, then it's actually your fault for getting too close to their feet. You can't blame them for not seeing you being around their feet. So remember to kind of look up, look around, and see where everyone else is. And there were a few scuba diving no-nos. Again, most of it's just be a nice person and humble, to be honest. If you have any tips or tricks for the new scuba divers, do's and don'ts, then let us know down in the comments below. And don't forget to check out today's sponsor, Mpora. There's going to be a link down in the description below for them. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.